rules that apply and the way that votes are counted and reported are all within the state province. They have nothing to do with the federal government. So, I think this is basically to desensitize America, get them prepared for interference that he intends in the midterms and certainly in 2028, and to try to tamper down the uproar that would typically come along with that if and when he does it.
Ty, there's a lot of stories out there right now that are very important here. There's another one from the Wall Street Journal, and I know you've seen this one. They're reporting that just before Trump's inauguration, 4 days before, the brother of the Emirati president paid $500 million for a 49% stake in Trump's family crypto venture. So $500 million for that stake. Then, of course, Trump is formally inaugurated, and the United States then agrees to give the Emirates its most advanced AI chips, which, of course, is a matter of intense national security. You told the Wall Street Journal, when they were reporting on this really important story, that this sort of thing, quote, taints American foreign policy. That was your quote. So then this weekend, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche was asked about your criticism, and I wanted to play for you, Ty, what he said.
I could have predicted what you just said he would say. That's what he says every time anything comes out about the president. The president is ethical. The fact that Ty Cobb claims that he would have counseled something different to the president, okay. I mean, that guy, I don't have a response to that.
Okay, I mean, that guy, I don't have a response to that. What's your response to him, that just sort of dismissing it like that?
Well, I will say that, the one thing I'm confident of is that I'm the least newsworthy thing that he could have said. And it was just, he resorted to attacking me just because what he really couldn't respond to was how in the world could he describe what Trump did as ethical? I mean, I spent a career in the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act world, traveling the world on bribery and corruption, and I've never seen it at a scale like the one that we're now encountering with Trump. The $480 million plane from Qatar, this transaction in the UAE, the host of things that he's doing to loot the country and shake down the world.
Politics lead Fulton County, Georgia wants its 2020 election ballots back. County officials have filed a federal court challenge seeking the return of the 2020 election ballots that the FBI seized last week. Not only was Fulton County at the center of President Trump's bogus and completely disproven 2020 election fraud claims, but Trump this week is also saying that he wants Republicans to take over elections in Atlanta and other counties and states that he lost in 2020, even though the U.S. Constitution is pretty clear that the states have the power to run federal elections. Now, little is publicly known about how the Justice Department under Pam Bondi justified this warrant. So Fulton County wants the judge in Atlanta to unseal the investigative affidavit that agents submitted to get that search warrant. Here's a look at Fulton County Police body cam footage obtained by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It shows confusion during this FBI raid last week.
The warrant will be amended slightly, but for all intents and purposes, what they had is what it's going to look like. We wanted to let her facilitate us moving through the building to unlock the gates so that we don't have to breach it, because one way or the other, the records are coming with us today.
So many unusual things about this. One of them, of course, you'll recall that the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was present for the raid, instructed to be there by President Trump. Gabbard later put the president on the phone to talk to those FBI agents, according to sources, which is unusual, if not entirely inappropriate. Gabbard says the president did not ask questions or issue any directives on the call. But today, the chairman of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, Rob Pitts, gave his take on Tulsi Gabbard's presence.
That leads me to believe, and any rational thinking person, that There's something sinister going on here. There's something bigger than just the FBI confiscating the records that they took.
Pitts also said something else that is raising alarm bells.
I received a call on Monday before last Wednesday, before the raid, that there were going to be arrests in Georgia. Secretary of State, his deputy, Sterling, I believe his name is, me and 2 or 3 others. I received another call, actually it was this Monday, same source, saying that you guys can't relax, even though the FBI has been there and they've confiscated the 700 boxes. Arrests are coming.
The lead reached out to the Justice Department, and their reply was no comment. Let's go to CNN's Kristen Holmes at the White House. And Kristen, this has been a continuous topic for the president, and now it seems as though he's going to try to use these delusional and disproven election claims about 2020 as a way to justify interfering in elections in areas that he lost that time in the midterms.
Yeah, and we've been reaching out about what specifics the White House can give us, because I will remind you that the press secretary actually came out to a gaggle and defended the fact that Tulsi Gabbard was there, not only saying that the president had directed her to go down to Atlanta, but also citing something that we had not heard before, which was this idea that Gabbard has been tasked with election integrity and security as one of her key priorities. That was not something that we were aware of at the time, and she says that the FBI is working hand in hand with Director of National Intelligence, with Tulsi Gabbard, as they work towards this kind of election security. But the reason why that itself was so confusing is the fact that the Department of Justice said they had no idea why Gabbard was on the ground. But clearly, this is part of the beginning of an effort of President Trump to continue to try to hunt answers for what he believes was him being wronged in 2020 and losing the election, which of course there is no evidence of, but also this perpetuation of an idea that perhaps he believes he could nationalize elections, which, as we have noted, is against the Constitution.
All right, Kristen Holmes, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Let's discuss this with Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. He is the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator, do you think Fulton County's legal challenge to the Trump administration will be successful? And is it possible that there was some sort of wrongdoing that actually warranted this search warrant?
You know, Jake, I don't know. I have seen no evidence. And let's go through what we do know. The Director of National Intelligence, who has no responsibility for domestic criminal investigations, shows up at this serving of the warrant. Is there no role? If there was a foreign influence issue, her obligation is to tell the committee. She's told us nothing. And then the following day goes out and gets the president on the phone to talk to the FBI agents who are doing the investigation. I know Donald Trump doesn't know anything about the Constitution, but wouldn't you have thought somebody in the White House would say, don't talk to the frontline investigators? We just had some of these questions raised in a hearing, and part of the excuse was, well, that the president had asked Gabbard to get engaged. Well, if he'd asked her, why was the president even aware of a search warrant being issued? I mean, the President of the United States is not supposed to be weighing in before any even indictments. This is, remember, I keep saying indictment. It was just servicing a search warrant. What in the hell is the President of the United States doing, knowing about that, and then asking the Director of National Intelligence, who has no role, to show up here?
Yeah. I want you to listen to what your Republican colleague, Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, said when asked about Trump saying earlier this week that he wanted Republicans to take over elections in 15 areas that he lost.
Actually, it has its roots with Stephen Miller, none other. And I'm as against nationalized election now as I was back in 2022 when the Democrats tried to do it. It was simply not votes. That's why, if nothing else, Stephen Miller really needs to get back to us, he's probably focused too much on his Duke education and should go back to third grade math. My granddaughter can figure out we don't have the votes to get that done.
So tell us his reference to 2022. That's a reference to Democrats trying to pass legislation having to do with voting, making it easier to vote, et cetera, et cetera. Seizing control of doing the elections, controlling the elections in 15 places is quite different. But either way, do you share Tillis's confidence that there simply aren't the votes there? Trump can't make this happen.
Thank goodness, at least on this issue, Leader Thune stood up and said, no, you can't go against the Constitution. And the incredible thing is, Jake, you know this, even when entities like the Cybersecurity Agency tried to help local election systems have better cybersecurity standards, we had pushback from local Republican officials saying, hey, we don't want the feds to be involved at all. So I know we're in the Alice in Wonderland, up is down and down is up, but this is beyond wacky and bizarre. And whether it's Stephen Miller or whatever this crowd of folks who don't know the law, who don't respect any of our principles, and sure as heck don't have any respect for the basic integrity of our election system.
Yeah.
You know, a year ago when people raised these concerns, I thought, well, no, that's a little overfetched. It's not outlandish and fetched. I think there is at least a crowd in the White House that wants to take away the ability to have votes fairly counted and cast. And candidly, I go back again, with this very thin, non-released basis for issuing this search warrant. What in the heck is the President of the United States knowing about that beforehand? And why in the heck would he send the Director of Foreign Intelligence gathering to that effort, especially since, just quick, I know my time's up, but this crowd already got rid of the FBI Foreign Malign Election Influence Center. They got rid of the ODNI, Director of National Intelligence Foreign Election Center. They have done nothing to protect our elections in the last year other than focus on Donald Trump's obsession about his loss.
So you're part of the Gang of Eight, which is leaders of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, and also leaders of the intelligence committees. Yesterday, you reviewed a classified whistleblower complaint involving the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Now, Gabbard's office has called the complaint baseless and politically motivated. I know it's classified. Is there anything you can tell us? Do you have concerns about the contents of the complaint? Is it credible?
Well, Jake, I can't, unlike a lot of folks in the White House, unlike the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, I think classified information ought to stay classified. I can't comment on what I saw. I can tell you this, it was way overly redacted. Which makes it hard to draw a substantive conclusion. But I can tell you this, the process, and I'll have more to say about this in the coming days, but the process is not optional. You get a whistleblower complaint, and if the whistleblower wants the complaint to go to Congress, it's supposed to be transmitted in 21 days. This complaint was filed in May. Somebody's not telling the truth about what they knew or who knew the law or didn't know the law. Either Tulsi Gabbard is completely ignorant of the law, or her lawyers didn't tell her the truth or lied to her, because there is now a chain that raises huge concerns about the process, even beyond the substance of the complaint, about how this was handled and why this whistleblower's complaint literally appears to have been squashed for months on end. And the only reason I had a chance, it was actually today, to look at it, was because the full Gang of Eight, including the Speaker of the House and Majority Leader Thune and Tom Cotton, all said, hey, cut the crap. We gotta see this.
Federal agents took boxes full of ballots from an election office in Georgia, and now that office is going to court to get them back. Last Wednesday, we told you about the search warrant executed in Fulton County, which covers the city of Atlanta. Federal agents took ballots from the 2020 election, which Donald Trump believes was stolen, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Fulton County officials have now asked a federal court to return those ballots. Mr. Trump recently called for Republicans to, quote, take over future elections.
The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. And we have states that are so crooked, and they're counting votes. We have states that I won that show I didn't win. Now, you're going to see something in Georgia where they were able to get, with a court order, the ballots. You're going to see some interesting things come out. But, like the 2020 election, I won that election by so much.
Well, while there are many countries where elections are run by the federal government, the United States just isn't one of them. Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution requires the states to run elections, and the law seems pretty clear on it. It's been upheld multiple times in courts, including in cases where President Trump has falsely alleged fraud. That's not stopped his Justice Department, though, from trying to get a hold of voter rolls from dozens of states. And one of those states is Georgia, where that office in Fulton County has searched, or was searched last week. An official told CNN there's something sinister going on here.
Listen, I'm no constitutional scholar, but I do know that the states control elections, not Congress, not the White House, and clearly not the president. So he's treating the Constitution as if it's a suggestion, and it's not. It's the law. And further, I would say that this whole issue with the raid was more about a distraction to what's really going on. Something sinister is going on, and I think this is really more about power on his part than it is about policy. It's power and not policy.
So what we want to know is there really, quote, something sinister about these search warrants? Joining me now is our senior political analyst, Ron Brownstein. I mean, we're taking lots of different elements here and coming up with the word sinister, aren't we? But what do you think is going on?
Well, look, I think an overriding lesson of the past year is that there is no idle musing in the second Trump term. Doesn't mean he gets to do everything he speculates about. Sometimes he's stopped, but I think it does mean that he tries. And so we ought to take him both seriously and literally when he's talking about nationalizing elections. The Constitution and the lack of 60 votes in the Senate make it highly unlikely that Congress is going to pass some kind of legislation asserting national control, for example, over ballot counting. But I think the raid in Georgia should be seen less as a look back than as a fast forward preview of what they may try to do through executive action in November, ranging from using ICE to discourage voters in Democratic central cities. Steve Bannon said today that damn right, we're going to have ICE out at the polls, to potentially trying to seize ballots and or stopping states from counting mail ballots that are received after Election Day. I think we should be taking this very seriously as on many fronts. The Trump administration tries to kind of pound away really at pillars of kind of our democratic constitutional system.
Why do you think they wanted the physical ballots?
Yeah, like I said, on the one hand, you could say, well, it's part of his obsession with 2020 and he's looking for any proof that he was somehow wronged. I think it's a test run for trying to seize ballots in November of 2026 and seeing what the courts and the country and the Congress do. He has already said he regretted not sending in military forces, the National Guard, to seize ballots after 2020. And again, I think you have to look at this not so much, and there's a tendency to kind of say, well, he's got this strange obsession. He can't give up that he was actually defeated in 2020. That all may be true, but I think what's more relevant is the degree to which he is trying to establish precedents and a model for what he might do in 2026, an election, Max, that by all indications is shaping up as extremely difficult for Republicans.
But he's talking about some interesting things coming out from what they found there. That would imply looking back at the last election, wouldn't it, at this point?
Yeah, but to create justification for actions, I think, on the next election,
So some sort of recount, or what is it?
Who knows? Who knows? Who knows what the chain of custody on the ballots are, and who knows what they are doing? It's extraordinary. I don't think there's ever been anything like this with the federal government seizing control of actual ballots. I don't think there would be a lot of faith that they would kind of be in a good faith way. There have been 3 full recounts in Georgia. It's been from 2020 described as the most kind of scrutinized single election probably in American history. They're going to find something now. This is a little like OJ, starting his search for the real killer, back in the 1990s. But I do think the key here is that this is not fundamentally directed at looking back. I think this is fundamentally directed at establishing a precedence for what might be coming. And we, as on many different fronts, are kind of step-by-step walking into a degree of constitutional crisis that, I'm not sure all Americans are prepared for. I would say one last thing. I mean, if Trump, in fact, does try in various ways, from seizing ballots to disrupting polling places to subvert the 2026 election, I think he is extremely misguided to think that blue America, the blue states and cities, are simply going to kind of, accept it and say, oh, well played, you got us. I think that disrupting and subverting the election would open the door to a level of civil unrest that we have not seen in this country for a very long time. And I think would be more comparable to what happened in some place like the Velvet Revolution in the late 1980s in the Eastern Bloc. I think they are playing with fire, and they are wrong to assume that they are the only actors in this with agency.
As much as the president wants to have the federal government run state elections, he can't just snap his fingers and make it so. Because in case anyone needs a refresher, I bring you Article 1, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, because it clearly states the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. But the Congress may at any time, by law, make or alter such regulations. The president seems pretty adamant about making a change. Why? Because of his long-standing and baseless conspiracy theory that he actually won the 2020 election.
Go to 2020 and look at the facts that are coming out. Rigged, crooked elections. If we have areas, take a look at Detroit, take a look at Pennsylvania, take a look at Philadelphia. You go take a look at Atlanta, look at some of the places that horrible corruption on elections. And the federal government should not allow that. The federal government should get involved. These are agents of the federal government to count the votes. If they can't count the votes legally and honestly, then somebody else should take over.
Well, joining me now is the official tasked with running Michigan's elections, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, who's also running for governor. Secretary Benson, I am very curious on your take. The president mentioned specifically Detroit as a problem. What goes through your mind when you hear the president push to have the federal government run elections in a state like yours?
Well, thanks for having me. And I think what goes through my mind is three things. Here we go again. I mean, time and time again, we have shown the receipts that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. And it was because state officials stood up and protected the votes of citizens in Philadelphia, in Detroit, in Atlanta, that we actually were able to protect that election and ensure democracy prevailed. But secondly, the question is, why now? Why rehash these long disproven conspiracy theories? And it, begs to sort of ask why he's a very unpopular president in this moment, has implemented a lot of unpopular economic policies that have driven up the cost of living exponentially in Michigan and other states. And so this also feels like an effort to deter us from holding him accountable at the ballot box either this fall in 2028 by suggesting falsely that the federal government should have any role or could have any role overseeing elections. Elections are run by the states. We do it very well with integrity, securely and effectively, time and time again. And we invite everyone to look at the transparent evidence that reinforces that fact. And this underscores again why it's so important that state officials protect democracy, because it's not a partisan issue and it should be done by the bipartisan professionals that do it in states like Michigan.
Let's talk about what partisan officials are doing in Washington, D.C. or saying. Speaker Mike Johnson suggested it would be unlikely for elections to be nationalized. Well, true, because it'd have to change the Constitution. While Majority Leader John Thune flat out said he's not in favor of the idea. What is your response to Republicans who are expressing these views about the president's intentions?
Well, it underscores that protecting democracy, the integrity of our elections, and the Constitution itself is not and should not be a partisan issue. And it reminds me of the local officials here in Michigan like Republican state senators who oversaw and asked questions about our elections here in 2020 and found indeed those results were accurate and the elections were secure. So we welcome transparency. We welcome questions about the elections, but we really need to center on facts and ensuring that facts and the law are followed in protecting citizens' ability to hold their leaders accountable. And I'm grateful for leaders on both sides of the aisle who agree with that, see with that, and will stand by that.
Let's talk about what's going on in Michigan, because the Bureau of Elections, they recently investigated claims, as you know, of 15 non-citizens being on voter rolls in Macomb County. Now, I understand the review found that one non-citizen did vote in a 2018 election, but had their registration canceled in 2022. And another voted in 2024, but is still being investigated. What do you say to Republicans who will then use examples like this to try to push legislation like the SAVE Act, which would require people to show a passport or a birth certificate in person to then register to vote?
Well, exactly as you said, Laura, you have to look at this with a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. And what the Bureau of Elections found in Michigan with those allegations of 15 voters potentially being unable or ineligible to be registered to voting was that a lot of them were actually U.S. citizens. In fact, one person who voted and was accused of being a non-citizen who voted, truthfully, was a citizen who was eligible to vote and cast their vote in an election. So we have to be very careful. All of us are committed to ensuring that only eligible citizens are voting in our elections. But in Michigan and in many other states, we have layers of protections in place to ensure that these efforts are fact-driven and according to the law and don't result in eligible citizens being blocked from exercising their constitutional right to vote.
Travel south with me, because we've learned that Trump asked the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, to play a role in investigating claims about the 2020 election. And that includes the most recent FBI search in Fulton County, Georgia. Here's what the White House press secretary had to say today.
Tulsi Gabbard has been tapped by the President of the United States to oversee the sanctity and the security of our American elections. She's working directly alongside the FBI Director, Kash Patel. This is a coordinated whole-of-government effort to ensure that our elections, again, are fair and transparent moving forward. I don't see anything wrong with the President tasking a cabinet member to pursue an issue that most people want to see solved.
Do you take issue with Gabbard's role in investigating the elections?
Yeah, I mean, look, the folks who actually can be trusted to securely and effectively administer elections are the bipartisan professionals on the ground in Fulton County, in Georgia, in places like Michigan, and all across the country. People who sign up, who are experts in this work and know exactly how to ensure our elections are secure. And again, we welcome people asking questions when it comes to these conspiracy theories about the 2020 election. They have been hashed and rehashed and re-examined multiple times. In Georgia, state officials conducted a full hand recount, affirming the results of the election. In Michigan, we conducted over 250 audits after the 2020 election, all of which reaffirmed the results. So these questions have been asked, they have been answered, and they've been conducted with integrity by state officials who know the law, know the rules, and operate transparently in a bipartisan way to protect the will of the voters and the voice of every citizen in our state.
Is President Trump's desire to, quote unquote, nationalize U.S. elections. The president insists he only wants voting that is fair and honest. He doubled down today on his demand for Republicans to take over elections in a number of states.
I want to see elections be honest. And if a state can't run an election, I think the people behind me should do something about it. Because, you know, if you think about it, a state is an agent for the federal government in elections. I don't know why the federal government doesn't do them anyway. The federal government should get involved. These are agents of the federal government to count the votes. If they can't count the votes legally and honestly, then somebody else should take over.
So the U.S. Constitution explicitly gives states and localities the power to run their elections. And even some Republicans are downplaying what President Trump means when he says nationalize voting.
The president had called yesterday for a takeover of federal elections, to nationalize in some states. Is that something that you think you should do, that Republicans should do, take over elections?
The president is expressing his frustration about the problems we have in some of these blue states where election integrity is not always guaranteed. So we have to figure out solutions to that problem, and that's what I think the Save America Act will do. So we're working on it.
Thank you, guys.
No.
So the president is not talking about taking over elections in Republican areas where he does well. He's talking about taking over in Democratic strongholds, like in Atlanta, where the FBI seized hundreds of boxes of election-related material last week. The director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was there. The White House says that Trump has now tapped her to oversee this issue of election security. Now, all this came up as the president signed the spending bill to reopen the federal government after the 3-day government shutdown. But funding for the Department of Homeland Security runs out in 2 weeks. Democrats are demanding changes in the administration's immigration enforcement tactics. A lot to dig into with Ron Brownstein, CNN senior political analyst, opinion columnist at Bloomberg. He joins me live here in Burbank. Ron Brownstein, welcome to The Story Is.
Back.
So, nationalizing elections, that's not legal.
Right.
That's not constitutional. What's really going on? Why is he bringing this up?
Well, I think one of the big lessons of the second Trump term is that there is no idle musing in this second Trump term. It doesn't mean he gets to do everything that he talks about. But I think it does mean he tries in some way to do everything he talks about, like acquiring Greenland, you know. And I think what we're looking at here is a warning signal that they are envisioning in various ways an unprecedented and, as you suggest, likely unconstitutional degree of federal role and interference in the November election. You know, when the members of Congress say, well, we're not going to pass legislation to take over control. No kidding. It's in the Constitution. They can't do it. They don't have 60 votes in the Senate. What happened in Georgia may be a better signal, because what we've seen on so many fronts in Trump's second term is that he's not asking for Congress to act. He's asking for them not to stop him as he asserts new boundaries of presidential power. And, you know, the idea that what they did in Georgia could be a test case for trying to seize ballots in Detroit or Dallas or Houston on Election Day, or prevent the counting of mail ballots that are received after Election Day, I think that is more the threat.
I mean, because most previous presidents would ask for permission from Congress to do things. This president asked for forgiveness.
Yeah, or that, and
or
the
not
court.
even, or doesn't even ask for forgiveness.
And from the Supreme Court, which has on occasion said no. They've said no on the National Guard, but more often have said yes, and with unsigned orders. So I think the key to watch here is not that they're going to pass legislation that somehow tries to seize control. It's that he is going to do things that effectively add up to seizing control, or something like seizing control, through executive action, and count on the Congress and the Republican majority on the Supreme Court to defend him. And by the way, as I think I've said to you before, if he succeeds in trying to subvert the election in a meaningful way, it's not like Blue America is just going to say, okay, you got us. You know, at that point, he is taking the country into a whole level of conflict that we have not seen in, you know, basically 160 years.
Well, and there's been great conflict over what's going on right now when it comes to immigration, which is why we are in this situation now where we have this 2-week pause, because the some time to cool things down politically. 2 weeks is not a long time to figure out how to what to do about immigration. Is there any deal that you could see where both sides sort of save face and we move forward on this?
Yeah, look, I mean, I've said to you before that, you know, a government shutdown is not a powerful enough lever to get a president to do something he doesn't want to do. That's the history of it, from Clinton to Obama to Trump. But the asterisk is, what does the president want to do? I mean, you know, he has taken an issue that was his strongest, one of his strongest, immigration, and where there is still substantial support in the country for what he has done on the border. And they have converted it from an asset into an albatross or an anchor. I mean, you know, we're seeing consistently 60% or more of Americans saying ICE is going too far. So does the president want to recalibrate and basically say to his base, hey, the Democrats made me do it? I mean, that would be the pathway towards some incremental changes. Obviously, it's not going to solve the whole issue, but can Democrats get some concessions? I would say they have a better chance than is typical during a government shutdown.
Meaning some things like
face mask, masking.
We're going to take off the face mask. You're going to wear body cameras.
Maybe even,
which Noam was already saying.
ICE asserting that they can enter people's homes without a warrant, forcibly enter homes without a warrant. I mean, there have got to be a lot of libertarian Republicans who are looking at that and saying, imagine if Barack Obama or Bill Clinton said that about the ATF and gun owners.
Yeah, well, and you look at the language Bill Clinton used on immigration from years ago, it sounds very Republican. But let's talk about what's happening broader in terms of the politics of this moment. You've got a new column out in Bloomberg, and it is titled, Trump's base is tiring of him at a bad time.
Yeah.
And essentially, you look at what traditionally has been the most important voting bloc in America, which is non-college educated whites.
Yeah.
Right?
And that has been the foundation of Trump's coalition since he emerged. I mean, all three of his races for president, he's won 2/3 of white voters without a college degree.
Well,
right?
look at this number.
And look at the number now.
So this number is now 51% approve, 48% disapprove for that group. That is a group that was with him at about 67% before.
Three times.
Yeah.
3 times. The best for any candidate since Reagan. And that is obviously a major drop-off. And that is the key, Alex, to the lock for Democrats widening the map. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the 10 states, Senate seats that are considered the most competitive, in 8 of them, there are more non-college whites than there are nationally in the electorate. If you look at the roughly 3 dozen House seats that Democrats are targeting, in roughly 2 dozen of the 3 dozen, there are more non-college whites than the national average. What has always been a kind of circuit breaker or ceiling on the Democratic opportunities in this election has been the persistence of Trump's strength with that group. But now there are multiple polls showing his approval right down to around 50-50. And yes, those voters are deeply skeptical of Democrats as well. But in 2020, no matter what they thought about Democrats, 94% of working class whites who disapproved of Trump still voted Democratic in the House. I think it is virtually guaranteed that if Trump's disapproval is anywhere among those voters is anywhere near what the polls show now, and there's no guarantee of that, Democrats will do a lot better among them than they have in the last few elections. And that, as I say, is the key to opening a broader range of opportunities for them in November.
And let's protect them. Some didn't want their names in. Some wanted their names out, as you know. And to me, that creates a lot of confusion.
Let's talk about the Clintons, because they have agreed, as you know, to sit down before your committee. And the House Oversight Chairman Comer is open to public hearings, but only after the private deposition. That's going to set a precedent, really, in many ways, to compel former presidents in the future. And that could mean one day a former president named Trump as well, should you see fit. Should he be compelled to testify?
If he's subpoenaed, I don't know how you're going to get out of it. I think we are creating an incredible precedent, though, and I would warn some of my colleagues. You know, they've been down this road before with the Clintons. I mean, they're incredibly gifted, and you know.
Meaning what?
Don't count them out. They're not idiots. I mean, he's an old guy from Arkansas. He's a good old country boy. He's a very popular president, 2 terms. If we didn't have term limits, he might still be in office. Miss Clinton. I personally found them offensive many times. I don't consider them to be really good people, but they're incredibly smart. And she's been a former Secretary of State. I've talked to former U.S. senators that served with her and said she was probably one of the more intelligent people out there. And so I would warn my colleagues, if they think this is gonna be a gotcha thing, I think that you're gonna get spanked. And I would say, let's just stick to the facts. If there were laws broken, if they broke laws, let's talk about that. Let's stay away from all the hyperbole and all the craziness, because there's plenty of that out there already. And I don't think we're serving the American public either. But again, I think we need to be concerned about the victims. If there were young ladies that were abused, then that needs to be brought to light, and there needs to be justice. But do I think there ever will be justice on this side of the grave? No, ma'am, I don't.
Some of the victims feel an injustice right now, even with the release of even many of the documents, because there have been redaction failures. And the DOJ released files that did not include redactions that were expected, including protecting some of the victims. Some survivors were actually named in the actual files and in pictures, I should add. Was that an egregious mistake by DOJ? Was there something about the handling that gives you pause as to how that could happen?
Ma'am, I've never really trusted the DOJ again, I'm not an attorney, under any real administration, just because the layers of the onion are so you peel one off and it's just another one under there, and the bureaucracy there is pretty incredible. But the fact that somebody's name was put out in error or whatever, to me, is egregious.
I want to turn to something the President of the United States had to say, particularly given your experience as a state legislator. You know full well about the power and the autonomy of the states. So the idea of the President of the United States doubling down on his call to nationalize elections, I'm curious your take. Listen.
I want to see elections be honest. And if a state can't run an election, I think the people behind me should do something about it. Because, you know, if you think about it, a state is an agent for the federal government in elections. I don't know why the federal government doesn't do them anyway.
Do you support his calls to nationalize the elections?
I think there's going to be a time where we have to have a national discussion about that, and I do, because what I think you've seen happen is the mistrust in elections. We've got 12% of the population, probably on average, give or take, local or state, whatever. And there's a complete mistrust by the left and the right from this. And what that looks like is, and when people, conservatives like myself here, are nationalizing something, it scares the daylights out of them. And it should, because when my people are in power, that's great. But when your people are in power, that's not great. And I mean that is in the political realm.
Of course.
So I think what we need to do is put up some incredibly good laws. I support the Save America Act, because I think if, you know, I'm not a drinker, but in Tennessee, if you buy a 6-pack of beer, you got to show a dadgum ID. And yet when you go to vote, you don't have to in a lot of states. And there's a mistrust element there.
Do you think that nationalizing or having federal government remove the reins from states who, by the Constitution, say that they're the ones to decide the time, place, and manner, would that increase the trust of the public or decrease it?
Well, I saw some recent polls, and it shocked me, really, because it was a very high number of Democrats and an incredibly high number of Republicans. And it was I would call it a super majority. And I just think that we have created such a debacle with our elections and the mistrust. We see people, you know, we've seen this thing in Georgia where there's 25 people registered at a piece of real estate that has a nice porta potty. You know, you see things like that. But the problem is that both parties are crooked when it comes down to it to get in power. I honestly think that it's just human nature. I think that the Democrats are more crooked than the Republicans are, but because I'm a Republican. But the reality is the public does not trust what's going on in elections, and for good reason. You have the mistrust of certain types of machines, and then some areas won't touch them because they say they're shady, and the other people say, no, we think they're great. And then that just creates a misbalance. Now, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, if I was king, everybody would trust what we're doing because we do it right. But the problem is Tim Burchett's not king, ma'am. And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of bad actors out there. I trust what the president's saying. I know what he's saying. He wants to put good barriers in. An attorney told me one time, good fences make good neighbors. And I think we need some good fences in our election laws in this country.
Well, you know who didn't want a king and wanted a patchwork of how elections are run? The founders of this country.
You're exactly right.
We'll have to see what happens
I would
next.
be a terrible king.
We don't want one in America,
no,
so
ma'am,
it's okay.
we don't. We had a war over that.
Congressman
Yes,
Tim Burchett, thank you so much.
We are often told when the president said that, he really means this. But when it comes to taking over the nation's elections, Donald Trump has been pretty clear. He wants to do it. After the White House tried to reframe, minimize, and ultimately sanitize Trump's unconstitutional call for Republicans to nationalize elections, the president is doubling down tonight.
I want to see elections be honest. And if a state can't run an election, I think the people behind me should do something about it. Because, you know, if you think about it, a state is an agent for the federal government in elections. I don't know why the federal government doesn't do them anyway. The federal government should get involved. These are agents of the federal government to count the votes. If they can't count the votes legally and honestly, then somebody else should take over.
And now, after backlash against Trump sending Tulsi Gabbard to an FBI raid at an election center in Georgia, The White House not only defended it, but proclaimed that she is now in charge of election security.
Tulsi Gabbard has been tapped by the President of the United States to oversee the sanctity and the security of our American elections. She's working directly alongside the FBI Director, Kash Patel. This is a coordinated whole-of-government effort to ensure that our elections, again, are fair and transparent moving forward. I don't see anything wrong with the President tasking a cabinet member to pursue an issue that most people want to see solved.
Gabbard, the nation's top intelligence officer, remains at the center of a mysterious and classified whistleblower complaint. Let's start with Trump insisting that the elections need to be federalized. He even said in that bite that we played that federal agents need to take over the counting of elections. Stacey Schneider, when you hear that from the president, first of all, should we believe him? And secondly, I don't know, should someone also provide him with a copy of the Constitution, perhaps?
That's a perfect question. First of all, your first question, should we believe him? Yes. When have we ever seen him not float his idea, get everyone all agitated, continue to float the idea, and then eventually follow through on it? So he could try it. He can't accomplish it legally. The Constitution has an elections clause that mandates that the states govern the time, place, and manner of our national elections. So for Trump to do this or accomplish this, the only way he could try to do it is by executive order, but it would be an unconstitutional executive order. So we're going to have all this dialogue floating around for days and backtalk and coming back again. He legally can't do it. Will he try? Probably.
So, Batya, I mean, a lot of people try to take what Trump says and they put it through the washing machine, launder it, and it comes out as something else. But Trump keeps repeatedly insisting that he wants the federal government to run elections in states that he lost because he thinks that if he lost, it wasn't fair. He's also said he regrets not seizing voting machines in 2020, again, when he lost an election. Is this productive? And at what point should Republicans say something about these lies?
I don't think it's productive, especially because it's impossible. Thank God, not constitutional, and so not going to happen. I do think that the SAVE Act is a great idea. 83% of Americans support it, as I learned on CNN this morning, and that includes, 76% of Black Americans, 82% of Latinos, 85% of white Americans. So to me, that's the move. Push the SAVE Act and force Democrats to admit that they are against what 83% of Americans want. I think this is all kind of just a distraction, a bit of nonsense.
Can I say one thing when we talk about distraction? Something that's not a distraction, that doesn't get a lot of attention, is that in Donald Trump's second term, every single one of his judicial nominees, there's been 38, every single one has said in sworn testimony, has not answered the question in sworn testimony whether Trump lost the 2020 election or what happened on January 6th. These are lifetime federal judgeships. These aren't spokespeople at the Department of Commerce. And it's really important as we talk about what's happening in Fulton County, as we talk about Gabbard, that we not lose sight of the fact that the President of the United States is reshaping the judiciary in ways that are deeply, deeply concerning. And frankly, this is going to be a problem for the country for decades to come.
Let me play. This is also Speaker Mike Johnson. And as you listen to this, just remember that Mike Johnson, before he was Speaker, back in 2020, was one of the lead proponents of trying to invalidate the results of the 2020 election. But here we are in 2026, and here is what he is saying today.
What you're hearing from the president is his frustration about the lack of some of the blue states, frankly, of enforcing these things and making sure that they are free and fair elections. We had 3 House Republican candidates who were ahead on Election Day in the last election cycle. And every time a new tranche of ballots came in, they just magically whittled away until their leads were lost. And no series of ballots that were counted after Election Day were our candidates ahead on any of those counts. It looks on its face to be fraudulent. Can I prove that? No.
Proof is important.
Do I have any proof? No. But when you count votes and we lose, it's fraudulent.
Look, I think that there is a question, Abby. Lots of Americans have questions about the integrity of their elections. And I don't think that's an unfair point. I don't think it's an unfair point for the president or Congress to to invest resources, as Batya mentioned, via the SAVE Act to ensure that not only do we have qualified American citizens voting in our elections, but to invest those resources to ensure that we have safe and secure elections.
You gotta acknowledge, though, Tim, that when you have elected officials like Mike Johnson making things up and saying nonsense like that, yeah, there's no question that some Americans will hear that and think it's legitimate, even though he has no proof, even though there's nothing actually untoward about votes being counted and it not being in his preferred candidate's favor. So none of that, I think, is justified. That doesn't justify continuing with these lies in the year of our Lord, 2026, 6 years after 2020.
And I think that all the more reason why we should invest resources into ensuring we have safe and secure elections so that those questions don't have to be.
How about we just stop lying about the election?
Questions don't have to be. Well, look, Abby, if people see things
That's a really simple, elegant solution to this. Stop lying.
If people see things on the ground and they raise those concerns and we can point to those investments that have been made that have made these elections safe and secure, I think that's the way that you go about doing it. But you're never going to stop people from having questions or pointing to irregularities that they've seen in the election process.
But there shouldn't be questions anymore. This was lawsuited all over the federal courts back then. And every single judge, whether Trump appointed or not, found that there was no election fraud. That's what evidence is all about. So Mike Johnson's talk about what magically happened doesn't really count in the United States. It's based on evidence. And to continue to spend taxpayer dollars to send in troops of FBI agents to raid the Fulton County elections office, even though they had a warrant, to do so, a judge signed off on it. I'm not saying that they did anything improper. They followed the warrant. But the very idea of them going after and seeking a warrant to accomplish this 6 years later, when it's been disproven over and over again, and then to send Tulsi Gabbard there, when it is not her job to be on the ground conducting law enforcement. She is head of national intelligence. She is supposed to be monitoring the collection of foreign and national intelligence. She's not a law enforcement officer. She was sent there for the optics of it.